But the expectations right now for growth with these companies, it seems insane. People expect 40, 50% growth, and then Amazon comes out and says we're only going to grow 20-something percent, and the stock sells off.
That old Wall Street axiom, sell on the news and buy on the promise. They're all going to have a little bit of a dip in advertising and in e-commerce, but people are going to, at some point, when Delta subsides and we go back to a normal life, things will pick up again. But the biggest issue here is that tech and these big companies, 5, 6, 7 of these largest technology companies in the world, they are the future of the U.S. economy. And there's going to be regulation. There's going to be oversight. There's going to be a lot of challenges that they have to face from Washington, from the customers, but they are unstoppable.
Absolutely, and I want to talk about regulation in a second, but before we do that, I mean, just hit on this idea here that these companies were doing well before the pandemic. Most of them did very well during the pandemic.
They've set records this last quarter.
So is there why would you expect them not to do well after the pandemic?
Well, but because the CFOs of Google, of Facebook, of Amazon, they all said, we're not going to be able to repeat the phenomenal record-breaking quarters that we just gave you. And that's because people are not going to be captured at home and paying so much attention to the screens as they were for the last 18 months.
Yeah. Well, I mean, one of the reasons why a lot of these companies are doing well is because of scale and size. And we know there's been a lot of talk in Washington, particularly with this new administration, that maybe that needs to be rethought. You know, so whether it's targeting an Amazon, whether it's targeting a Facebook, I'm wondering how far do you think that can go realistically?
Look at what's happening in Europe. Look what happened in the last couple of weeks in China. China has said, technology is going to make us the global leader that we want to be, we aspire to be, but they have been disappointed with the technology advances that the big tech companies in China have made, and so they're saying we've got to get more involved. We can't let them just go off on their own and make a lot of profits because they're not really advancing the technology. We're on the verge of a huge transition in technology. It's quantum computing, artificial intelligence, artificial reality is going to revolutionize and transform advertising, and the tech companies are on top of that, but Washington is way behind the curve. The consumer is just waiting for things to happen. Today was an interesting day because all of the major tech companies, except for Apple, took a little bit of a dive after those great quarterly reports of this last week. Why did Apple not go down? Because they made most of their money on the iPhones, and the iPhone is a cash register, a money machine, and the apps and the services are going to generate.
But when we talk about reining in these companies, I mean, some of these companies would argue that the reason why they do well is because of that scale, and if you don't allow them to have that scale, they're not going to necessarily be as good. You don't buy that?
I don't buy that at all. In China, 34% of all retail sales in that country are on the internet. They're e-commerce. Think of the millions of shopkeepers and stores around China that are going to be with no customers if it gets any, and they're heading towards 50% e-commerce sales. That's way behind. The U.S. is somewhere at 7 or 8% of the total retail sales. Everybody is knocking Amazon, but Amazon is a drop in the ocean compared to what is going on in China with Alibaba, for instance, or Tencent.
But of course, the political environment, or I should say the political structure, the government structure is a lot different in China. Xi Jinping can do whatever he wants, and there's not going to be a lot of pushback. You know, Joe Biden and the regulators here, they got to navigate 435 members of Congress.
The biggest problem we have in Washington is that very, very few people in the government understand really know what the tech world is all about, and they've got to learn. They've got to jump on that learning curve.
What about Europe? I mean, we've seen Europe make some pretty interesting progress on some of their pushback on some of these big tech companies.
Well, they're stressing privacy, security, ransomware. You don't hear about the ransomware attacks that we're enduring here in Europe, and the other thing that is. They want security. They want everything to be not overseen by the government, but overseen by the tech companies. And they've been very aggressive at Facebook, at taking Facebook to task. Google paid a couple of $2 billion this summer on fines for non-compete monopolizing.
Just real quickly, we have about 30 seconds here, but does this give you pause? I mean, from an investment perspective, like if you're looking to invest in the tech sector, is there a reason to pause?
I don't think so.
No.
I mean, Google right now is 17 times bigger than it was in 2013. They're going to continue to grow. People talk about breaking them up. How do you break up companies? The cloud is the biggest addition that the technology companies have put, and those are critical to the growth of the nation's economy.